Are you frustrated with your players who sometimes maybe like to just a little bit metagame? Or is metagaming completely out of control at your game table? Well, if so, today I'm gonna be your coach on how to deal with metagaming in your D&D and RPG games. And I have 6 plays in particular that will help you move the ball down the field. Number 1, not all metagaming is worth stopping. Look, sometimes we just get too bent out of shape over these drastic and horrible injustices. A level 2 PC just happens to use a flaming torch against a troll that just won't stay dead. The wizard casts a fireball into the room and just happens to center it perfectly so that it catches all the enemies, including those around the corners that the wizard can't see, but that the player who's looking at the grid and minis can. Like, really? Are these the things that we're gonna get all worked up about and go scream at the referee? Are these the things causing us to lose our games in triple overtime? Are these really worth stopping the game for a heated, accusatory 30-minute conversation in the dugout? I would say probably not. Look, some things can be justified. Trolls are a common bedside story parents tell their children about. There are even nursery rhymes about heroes using fire to kill trolls dead. The wizard could have decided to plant the fireball there because it would cover other parts of the room where enemies might be hiding. These are gray areas, and gray areas probably aren't worth calling a timeout on. My suggestion is to choose your battles. So the other guy threw a little bit of an elbow into the block. It happens. But if he needs you in the jewels, hey, maybe we should talk about that. Time out! Speaking of metagaming, have you heard of Lair magazine? Well, of course you have. It's all I talk about. Lair magazine is a monthly publication full of 5th edition Dungeon Master resources that all DM Lair patrons receive. Adventures, new monsters, traps, puzzles, NPCs, villains, adventure ideas, encounters, beautiful maps. All 100% compatible with D&D 5th edition. In addition to Lair magazine, DM Lair patrons also get loads of other perks. Monthly Zoom hangouts with me, playing in D&D games I run, helping decide which videos I make, and most importantly, the knowledge that every dollar you spend as a DM Lair patron goes toward hunting down and bringing justice to filthy metagamers everywhere. Well, of course it's true. Anyway, you can become a DM Lair patron at the link below. Do your part to put sleazy metagamers behind bars. Number 2, some metagaming is good. Okay, I know what you're thinking right now. Your coach is a moron. He's doing a video about stopping metagaming. His first point was to allow minor metagaming, and his second point is that some metagaming is good. Well, don't worry, lots of coaches are morons. I'm no different. The fact is that every game would be miserable if everyone, players and dungeon masters, weren't metagaming to some extent, and especially in specific areas. For instance, how about the fact that the adventuring party always seems willing to go into the next dungeon the DM planned or go on the next adventure? Why don't they stop at level 3 when they've amassed more gold than most people will ever see in their lives and retire? Why does the group miraculously stick together from level 1 to 20 even though the rogue and the paladin hate each other? How is it that that part of the barbarian's background as the wizard's apprentice just happens to come up and interact with the main campaign story arc? Why are most encounters and adventures designed just right to make the PCs doubt whether they can win or not, but almost always they come out with another W on their record? If Lord Paxton is so horrible and evil, why is the Sword Coast Guard the only adventuring group fighting him? It's because we are all metagaming to some extent. And we need to. If we don't acknowledge the fact that we're playing a game and everything must needs be 100% role-playing and never using any out-of-character knowledge, the game would be unplayable. We'd likely all get frustrated, clean out our lockers, and go home. Adventuring parties would split up every other game session, the paladin would kill the rogue, and the next dungeon would have an ancient dragon in it that murderizes the level 3 party. The game would be unplayable. Time out! If you're enjoying this video and perhaps think the illustrious purple background complements my ruggedly handsome beard, give me a thumbs up. Let YouTube know who the best dungeon couch on the internet is. Number 3, call the player out on their metagaming. Yes, here we go. I'm finally going to tell you how to stop metagaming. After all this prattling on with sports metaphors and frivolous timeouts, I have found that the best way and probably the simplest way to deal with metagaming is to simply ask the player, how would your character know that? Or some variation thereof. Essentially, you call the player out on their metagaming, but in a non-accusatory way. You don't say, "You filthy metagamer, I became a DM Lair patron so that Luke might smite commoners like you," even though I'd probably pay Penguin Butt to smite them. Instead, you say, "Hey, we all know that the rogue just got dropped by the bugbear in the next room, But how would your wizard PC know that? And how would he know exactly where to cast his dimension door to? And doing this thusly works magic in two different ways. First, you are calling the player's attention to the fact, or at least the perceived fact, that they are metagaming. Hey, I see what you're doing there, but you're doing it in a gentle way that is less likely to ruffle feathers. Second, you're putting the burden on the player to justify why they are doing that thing. It's possible they might have a viable explanation. Remember that my familiar went with the rogue and that I was looking through his eyes? It's possible that you, the DM, are overlooking something, and that there might be a reasonable way for the PC to have certain knowledge. And if the player comes up with nothing, they will often backpedal. Oh yeah, I guess my wizard wouldn't know that. Okay, I cast Fireball on the Mind Flayer instead. And problem solved. Time out! But what if it doesn't solve the problem? What about then, Dungeon Couch? Do you just let the player's character do that thing anyway, even if it's clear they are metagaming and the character couldn't possibly know X thing? What if the player gives a crap justification? Well, my wizard is really smart and he knows the rogue often gets himself into trouble, so he's casting Dimension Door to go to the other room just in case. Well, that's up to you, Dungeon Master. You're the referee here. There have been times when I shrugged and let the player do it, even though it was clearly metagaming. It just wasn't grave enough to justify action. And there have been other instances where I said, no, your PC can't do that. It's metagaming, and I don't buy the justification you just pitched me. Number 4, negate the potential for metagaming. I do this as much as I can in my games. The number one thing I do is avoid saying the names of monsters. It's a green-skinned gremlin, not a goblin. It's a squid-faced monstrosity, not a mind flayer. Okay, sure, your players are going to guess at some of these. But many times, if you just describe the monster, but don't show a picture off the internet, holy crap, that is a surefire way for the players to know exactly what the monster is. Unless, of course, you show a picture of an orc, but the monster is a hobgoblin. You devious dungeon master, you. There might even be a flag down in the field for that sort of flagrant, underhanded play. But anyway, if you just describe the monster, they often won't know. Or they'll be unsure and have just enough doubt that it impedes metagaming. And some metagaming is subconscious too. The moment you say troll, every player has a use fire floating in their minds. Instead, help your players to not metagame. And this can apply to a lot of things. The DC for saving throws, for instance. Never, 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 ever tell your players what the DC is. Some DMs be like, make a DC 12 dexterity save. Yeah, sure, I know that saves time with determining who saves and who fails, but now the players all know the DC for that enemy spellcaster. And a DC 12 is pretty low, so they won't bother using inspiration or special character abilities that give them a bump on the saving throw. Furthermore, if the DC is only 12, that means the spellcaster probably isn't too powerful, and they probably can take it easy and not expend too many resources in this battle. And they know every single other time that that spellcaster casts the spell that the DC is what? 12! It's metagaming! So don't make it easy for them. So do you see how revealing just one thing can cause a cascade of metagaming? So consider the different pieces of information you reveal that is out of character and ask yourself if revealing it might make it harder for your players to not metagame. Number 5, change things so that metagaming doesn't work. I usually don't like this approach. This is like saying that boxer is poking holes in the face of the other guy because he has a needle in the thumb of his glove. Okay, I guess we should just give the other guy a hockey mask. No! Take the stupid needle out of his glove. Address the root problem. And if the runner is stealing second base, you don't move second base into the outfield. You beam the runner in the face with the ball. However, not everyone is comfortable beaming people in the face, so changing game mechanics and other stuff is an option. For instance, instead of having the troll's regeneration be stopped by fire and acid damage, make it be cold damage instead. You have a player that looks up stats on all the monsters in the game, or veteran players that just know the stats because they are often DMs themselves and can't help themselves? No worries, just homebrew all of the monsters in your game. Is your player reading the module himself as you all play through it? That's an easy fix. Just change everything in the module. Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating to make a point here. There needs to be a line. How much extra work and customization is the Dungeon Master really going to do before they should just consider dealing with the actual cause of the problem? A little bit is not a big deal, and honestly, homebrewing monsters and adventures is often the sort of thing that is fun for Dungeon Masters. So hey, maybe players metagaming is the perfect excuse you need to have some homebrew fun. But there might reach a point where it's just no longer a viable solution, or you just don't want to rewrite entire adventure modules because, you know, you bought the module so that you wouldn't have to do that. So you deal with the root cause. Yo, Jim Bob! We're playing Storm King's Thunder and you're literally reading the module as we go. That's not cool. Stop or you're out of the game. Or, hey Sally, you've been playing D&D for years. You've been a DM even. I know that you know that I know that you know that most of the monsters can do, and we all know that. It's understandable, and I don't really plan to homebrew every monster in the book. All I ask is that you do your best to avoid metagaming. But I'm not going to micromanage you. What are you doing? I'm the dungeon couch. I call the timeouts around here. That's right, that's right. Back to the bench with you. Number 6, metagaming shouldn't break your game. If your game is so fragile that a player doing a bit of metagaming breaks it, there's a larger issue with your game. Or if your ego is so fragile or your patience so thin that you can't stand it and freak out when a player does a little metagaming, from your point of view, there is a larger issue with your character as a dungeon master and perhaps as a person. I've seen lots of metagaming over the years and none of it has ever been something so horrible that it derails an encounter, an adventure, or an entire campaign. Of course, I'm talking about reasonable limits of metagaming. If you have a player who is literally buying and reading Curse of Strahd before you run the game for them, or a player who is brazenly looking up monster stat blocks even during the game, then yeah, that's a problem on a much larger scale. I'm not suggesting that you tolerate that and just shrug it away. It's brazen cheating at that point, and not just a little bit of metagaming. And you should also be concerned about how your other players will feel about such a thing. Remember, it's not just your game and your campaign. The other players have a stake in it too. Their feelings must be considered as well. But anyway, if the metagaming isn't at that scale, it really shouldn't affect the game that much. It might annoy you, sure, but things will be okay. Click on the screen now to binge another fine DM Lair video, or to become a DM Lair patron and stop filthy metagamers once and for all. And until next time, time out!